Hi there, and welcome to the first live episode of Signal by Nova. My name is Ramón. I'm one of the co-founders here at Nova, and I'm together with Andrea, my co-founder, and Cristian, our CPO. Welcome, guys. How are you?
Very good, Ramon. Pleasure to be here and kick this off with one of our pillars in the team.
Totally. So you, Cristian, you joined the company, I think it's already a bit over 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you want to briefly introduce yourself to the audience and what's that you do at Nova, and then we'll kick off with the AI discussion that is, I think, the most relevant.
Cool. Thank you, Ramon. I've been so excited about this kind of conversations live with our community and so on. So very excited to be here with you too. And yeah, as you said, 5 years already at Nova building products. It's amazing how everything has changed during this time. Like very fast. I'm working with the product team, and what we call as product in Nova, it gathers the three teams of product management, product design, and the data and AI. So that's more or less what I'm doing in my day-to-day.
Totally. You're a comedian on your other life, but we'll cover that in another episode. So I think what could be relevant to start over this session is that I think the last 3 months, I think the world has changed. Maybe in the books of history, we'll analyze the beginning of 2026 as this moment of change, where things in AI started to evolve ever more rapidly. Mm-hmm. So just explain to the audience how we have changed the way we build product at Nova, because I think the last quarter we have massively changed everything around product building. So why don't you walk us through that?
Yeah, it was a drama because I was on holidays, and all of a sudden I came back after the new year and so on. And I remember the head of AI at Nova, Jesus Copado, who was like, Cristian, no, man, like everything has changed. And I was like, okay, what has changed that much?
The singularity is here.
Totally. And he was right, like everything has changed that fast. Like as a bit of context, we were already doing a lot of things in Nova before, like these changes that we are mentioning with AI. Like, for example, in September, the product team at Nova already put in production like software replacing like a big platform of Nova. As you remember, like in September, we'll release our new acquisition funnel with byte-coded software that the product designer made himself. And that was already, like, it was September. That was a long time ago in AI's time, But it's true that after January, like everything changed with like, I'd say like 2 releases: the release of the Claude Code agent and the release of the Opus 4.5 model. Like the combination of those 2 things was massive, and it was a change for everything. Like in terms of, first, we as a product team, we start like doing everything with software. Like if you think about our end-to-end flow of building products, everything changed radically. Like from the data analysis, the research, then like building the documentation, working with the developers, and also testing the product. It has all like changed with AI. For example, like a crazy example, this week we released a new AI feature, and at the past I used to like test like AI prompts manually and so on. Then I had the idea of saying, okay, let's ask Claude Code to do this testing manually. And in 1 hour, I launched like 1,500 tests, like independent tests with many variation of the prompt. And so it was like totally crazy. So the whole end-to-end process changed. We're also building like product ourselves. Like, for example, internal tooling, the product team is doing like crazy developments in terms of, for example, our ATS and so on. Something also crazy that is one of the things that I'm more excited about is that we're like, when, for example, a product guy wants to do something with data, we're removing like the data scientists need like as a middleman. Like, for example, if you as a product manager want to treat data want to make taxonomies, want to predict things and so on, you can do it yourself. You don't need to ask a data scientist, okay, can you get me this data? Okay, can you change how we're treating this and so on? So we're becoming like data scientists. And last of all, our technical team also adopted the technology, and now they're going like 3x the velocity that they were going before. So that was something really crazy.
No, I think that was massive, because I remember last year, as we were all excited with Cursor, the software team was maybe doing 10% more, 20% more, but the reality is that whenever a feature became too complex, the reality is that we still needed engineers to code. But basically, in the last three months, right, it's not only that you, as product managers, as you said, you have kind of these super power skills where you're already doing code yourself, either to do product or to actually build tools as if you were software engineers, but also that the software engineers themselves, they are not coding any longer. Like, they are not typing lines of code anymore, but just talking in natural language to Claude Code or Codex, and it's the model that are creating all of the lines of code, or 99% of the lines of code. And as you said, this is not any longer 10%, 20% productivity, but we are doing, I think in the last 2 sprints, we improved ourselves by 2x factor almost, or 80% more than the previous record of productivity. So we measure productivity as a context of Nova in software. How many points, which is how many complex, the number of points is the complexity of a task. So how many tasks do we do, and what's the total complexity of the tasks accomplished? And we have basically, as you said, 2 to 3x that in the matter of weeks, which is really crazy.
I think what Cristian said, it's true to product, but I think the most interesting wave was after you have been a bit of the pioneer together with your team, the spillover to teams who were really very far from product, and seeing Maria from B2C suddenly migrating databases from Intercom to HubSpot, or doing complex things from a tech perspective thanks to Claude. I think that ripple effect of productivity has been seen across all teams, and it was hard at the beginning, because likely we relied on you opening the way, but I think our many organizations out there are still in that phase where everything looks exciting on the surface level, but they get stuck into the adoption. So I don't know if there are any reflections from all of us on how we manage, to make sure everybody made a great use of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that when I talk to people outside Nova and so on, the majority of companies are not here. Like, if you think about startups and scale-ups and so on, like, everyone is trying it, and you see that on LinkedIn now. I see a lot of posts of, I just opened my first pull request and so on of non-technical people and so on, and that's true.
You did that in January, no?
Yeah, I did it in January. Yeah, I thought that was a huge change. I never opened a pull request again. But the truth is that if you speak to people out there, like, people are not here. I think this is a massive change that, for example, in Nova, I think, or for example, in this kind of companies, we're lucky because we have a lot of flexibility. And in our case, we have the AI team who could try things very easily and with a lot of freedom, but not in every company is like this. And
I think we were lucky because of the size, because we're 50 in the team, right? So I think it's small enough still to drive change fast, big enough to have a massive impact. No, I think that it's way more challenging to drive adoption in an enterprise, or if you're 1,000 people. I think one of the keys to the adoption, from my point of view, is that we had one person per team, which is very clear to me to point out. I think it was Diego in the delivery team, it was Maria in the B2C team. Of course, I mean, the entire product, AI, tech, of course. But then we had, I myself was running the change on sales. No, I think we have one person at each department that took the lead. They quickly learned Claude Code, thanks to Jesus. No, I think Jesus did a big effort of, say, coaching at the very first steps, because the first steps are, I think we walk through them in a minute, but they are a bit complex. Like, you have to download few software, you have to change your mind of how you work. But once you're set up, it's just so easy. Like it's just any task can be actually, or most of the tasks can be automated and can be done better with code and Claude, right? So I think my recommendation would be find this one person, this early adopter that basically would spread the word inside every department, and things will happen.
It's true that I also had the feeling at times where there was a phase of being happy to automate just for the sake of trying. There is a phase where you start to question the outcome in terms of, was this very much of an increase of productivity? There was a moment where people in Slack were sharing small wins, but I think that fostered more the culture of trying and experimenting. I think the bigger question for us and for anyone would be, would this translate into higher revenues? Would this translate into reduced cost? And I think the answer is yes, but there is a gap in between having fun and feeling hyper productive and adding value to the company, which I think it's a great challenge ahead.
Totally. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the product side of things and building software. So more concretely, Cristian, what has changed? Like, walk us through how we used to build product from this pitch perspective, the quarters, and how is it now, and what are the real outcomes that we're seeing?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so in the before like this big change, we used to do quarterly planifications. So, for example, now in March we would be closing the whole second quarter of the year in product.
Sounds crazy. That sounds crazy.
It's crazy because at that time it seemed like a perfect period in terms of how much we could define, how much the tech team could spend on cool deliverable and so on. So everyone was fine with that 3-month period for definition and development. When this huge change came up, we realized that this model and the previous Agile and Scrum that we were following didn't make more sense because it's crazy to think how much we can build now in 3 months. So if you have to be now defining the whole next 3 months, it could be totally impossible. We wouldn't have hands to make that much definition.
Because the bottleneck wouldn't be producing software, would actually be kind of agreeing exactly what are the right products the right problems to tackle in which order, right? It's very hard for us to know what is the right thing to do in May versus June because we don't know.
Totally. Could be super difficult.
And also the feasibility of what you can do in that month. If you would think about how this evolved in terms of output, we would have most probably short planned.
Exactly, because what we used to do in those 3 months is we say, okay, we estimate this feature to take a month or 6 weeks of one engineer. Now we don't really know how much time things take because they take shorter and shorter.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, so we start rethinking if we want to make this work, how should it change? Also, in this nowadays, I don't know who is able to predict how the world is going to look in 3 months. So making 3 months prediction of your features and what's going to be more impactful and so on doesn't make more sense. So we moved to a monthly planning and monthly definition period. So right now, for example, in our tech team, they have what we call cycles of 4 weeks, which is similar to 1 month, 4 weeks, which is 2 development sprints. And the tech team, we try to define features in order to have them ready in 1 month advance. So you have 1 month. Then you have the data team and the design team who are also making sure that the technical team will have those resources available. So if they need designs or if they need data endpoints and so on, and then the tech team comes after developing the feature. But as I said, right now we're in the monthly cadence. And it's becoming also like difficult to know which features are we developing, which feature already agreed to develop, and so on. It's becoming a big change. It's not been easy to implement. Like I have to admit that there are a lot of challenges in this new process. I'm talking with a lot of product managers, learning how they're doing it on their companies. But for everyone, it's becoming a huge shake. For example, in our case, we have like two clear like business lines in terms of B2B and in terms of B2C, for example. I don't think that this new way of working is gonna work that well for the B2C, for example, which doesn't need like such a big developments all the time. So it's a more mature products, and there are a lot of small needs that they need, like in terms of growth, in terms of an initiative, in terms of something small in the community that needs to be solved, and so on. For example,
except the one big feature we cannot spoil, but that's aside.
Totally, but those are like big features are built in a month. So now it's becoming a huge challenge, Ramon.
Yeah, totally. I think to me, the big question that we have to solve that we haven't solved yet is where are the bottlenecks, right? Because it has always been the case where software capacity was the bottleneck. I think that's the typical thing in most companies, that the time of engineers is the most precious thing at the company, and you have to maximize its output, or at least that was the way we were operating with. And I think right now, as the engineers, they start to talk to agents and run multiple of them in parallel and be 2, 3, 10x more productive. We are questioning ourselves, where are the bottlenecks? Like right now, for instance, our data team is suffering a lot, our data and AI, because there's a lot of AI features coming out on the Nova Recruiter, and it's a team of 2 versus a team of 6 on the engineering side. We don't know. I mean, design hasn't been as automated as code. Like you can design, let's say, MVPs, but to follow a good design system and so on, we haven't seen the same levels of productivity, right? Still with Claude Code, although there's a few things we can discuss in the news on Google coming out recently and so on that seem cool.
Yeah.
But it might be that the bottleneck is now on design, on decision making. For instance, we used to make decisions, Andrea and myself, we used to review each and every pitch. Now we won't have the time, no? So I think probably the way to go forward, in my opinion, is that you have to find what's the bottleneck of your company, address that first, and then move to the next bottleneck. And probably that bottleneck will be iterating in between tech, product, design, decision making, or and I think that's going to be the cycle we have to solve.
Yeah, no, I think the bottleneck, just to make it more tangible on my experience, I think you mentioned it briefly, but since the abundance of content became real, now every time I get asked to review something, I open the Notion and there are many more rows and content lines. So I really feel the human in the loop is becoming the bottleneck when it comes to now the leverage is on the creator versus before, where suddenly you really need to take much more time to follow everything. So I think there must be also decision-making shift, because you cannot be the bottleneck reviewing. You cannot
exactly. So sometimes it's actually faster to, let's say, ship a product and see how it works, rather than decide a priori whether we believe it's going to be a good decision or not. Like I think I think that requires a great A/B testing infrastructure. For instance, we didn't have it. We were using a provider called Posthub that wasn't working actually quite well for us. So we built our own A/B testing infrastructure. So now we are going to be, I think, iterating much faster, because, as you say, it's probably not a matter of questioning ideas as much, particularly if they are small. I think.
I think I lost you.
Possible I lost Ramon.
I think I was lost there for. How teams are working. Let's double down a little bit also on how product is actually building software, because you, Cristian, but then now also me, we have been shipping internal tools these last few days. And I think that's something that is, when I'm talking to people, they find that very impressive, that we're able to ship tools that go to production and actually work. So walk us through that as well, Cristian, briefly. And then also on more concretely, how are you working personally? Like, what's your Claude Code setup? Like, how are you working? Because I believe you have raised your level of productivity kind of 10x. Like every time we have a weekly, you and I'm very impressed with what you bring. So walk us through that.
Yeah. So regarding like releasing, like building software myself, I think I'm on a kind of like a sweet point that I have like enough knowledge to manage some technically complex things that are kind of like delicate with AI. For example, manage API keys with sensitive information and so on. When I see like non-technical people at all, like people who hasn't touched any line of code, and for example,
they send the API key in the chat, and it's there.
Yeah. So you see that there are sometimes that you say, "Oh wow, I don't know how this guy is going to release something to production. This is going to be dangerous." In my case, I have that base because I used to like long time ago. I used to do some software development, but like 10 years ago. And that puts me in a very good place where I have the functional knowledge and the very little technical knowledge requested in order to do something like this. So I've been trying to vibe code for 1.5 years already. I have a test that is the Bullshit app. I have a product, like a side project that is called Bullshit. And every time there is a major release, I try to build the same app with vibe coding tools, And 1.5 years ago, I tried it with Cursor and GPT-4, and it was kind of okay, but it didn't work. Then with 4.0, I did the same. Then with Composer, I did the same, and I was becoming better and better and so on with the releases of the new models. But then, as we mentioned, with Claude Code and the Opus model, you realize that the technology is there. Like you do like a few prompts and everything is one shot. It's really incredible.
Examples. Give concrete examples of walk us through the ATS, for instance, which is basically for people, just as a context. So we're building a software for sourcing talent. That means searching them and contacting them before they're interested in a process. And we have always questioned ourselves on whether we should be the next kind of tool, which is the ATS, applicant tracking system, which is where a candidate that is interested, in a company would follow an interview process. Like, and you as a recruiter, you kind of have different stages and kind of move them in between stages and so on. And this is the kind of tool that was, okay, we would like to build this at some point, but it was never a priority. And in my mind, it was never going to happen, actually. But now we have an ATS.
Yeah. Also, at that time, it was like a challenge of, guys, the technology is here. Like, I want to show you what we are able to do, But as you mentioned, like it was 3 weeks period, we were able to develop a full ATS platform with all the components that you see in like big platforms such as like Team Taylor, like those kind of really great ATS. We have already one person from the team working on a daily basis with this new ATS. The idea is that in 2 weeks will be released to the whole company, and it's really amazing.
And in less than 2 months, it's going to be used by clients. Like I'm already pitching it to clients, and they are loving it. Actually, I did a demo yesterday with the client.
With the actual product.
I did a demo on the real product yesterday, and people were impressed because it does have things that most ATSs don't have. It's, I think, better built for now for headhunters than internal clients. But for headhunters, I believe there's nothing in the market that reaches the level of sophistication. So you get everything, like the note, like you can connect your calendar, your Gmail, It takes the notes from the interview. You have a script for the interview yourself. It builds a report for the client.
Yeah, that's
like everything is automated, feedback emails in any language. Like it's really crazy.
Video celebrations, even with the faces of our people celebrating. It's really crazy.
I don't think there's an ATS in the market we could have purchased that is even close. and it was built in 3 weeks without any software engineer involved, which is, I think, the beauty. No?
And it wasn't my main task during those 3 weeks,
No.
to be honest.
It was your side project.
Other stuff.
Vibe coding at night.
If we sell this properly, we shouldn't be saying this, that we did it in 2 weeks, to be honest.
Yeah, of course.
But the product is great.
With sending it to production and having a stable one, maybe it needs some refinements, but yeah.
I think the cool thing about this, if you think about it, is that I built it with Diego, who is a headhunter, like pair development of us, and it's crazy to be doing pair development with a headhunter. Like
a headhunter that has never coded, but he was shipping features, solving bugs with Claude Code himself as well, right?
Totally.
In another branch of GitLab.
Yeah, but it was everything about judgment. It was everything about product sense. We were not having technical conversation about how to build things. We were thinking about how the recruiters experience and so on. So when you put like functional people on the ideation and the execution, I think products are going to be much better in the future. Totally.
One last question on the APIs before we shift to the next topic is that we also tested working with OpenClaw as an agent there, right? Like walk us through that, which I think was a cool experiment as well.
Yeah, that was an experiment that I did. The idea is that I wanted to have like an expert on every Slack conversation at Nova. So I tried like creating my own Slack and having OpenClaw there, like an autonomous agent within that Slack. And it was pretty cool. I liked the experiment a lot. I used it for technical tasks, and I realized that the agent of OpenClaw wasn't as good as my agent in Claude Code. So the OpenClaw agent was building some technical things that wasn't as cool as my things that build in Claude Code, you know?
And why is that? Were you using a different model or?
No, the model was the same, but as we mentioned, like the evolution that we had in January, it wasn't only because of the model, but also because Claude Code agent is very good defining, okay, what needs to be done? What do I need to check in order to approve this task? What is the next one, you know? So all that planification and completion check that the Claude Code agent does is not that good for the OpenClaw agent, you know? So eventually I stopped using the OpenClaw. It was useful.
I remember OpenClaw, it was all over Twitter for a few days. You could only read about OpenClaw, and I remember setting it up and connecting to Gemini, and in a few seconds my API tokens, my tokens were gone. But I think it was interesting because it was among the first to have a strong memory of you. Like there was always a memorization problem that OpenClaw kind of managed, for which it became very popular. But now with the Claude skills and MDs, it seems like I don't see any differentiator any longer. I don't know if not being technical.
I think it still has this autonomy where I think Claude or Anthropic is trying to kind of copy each and every feature to build a, let's say, more secure OpenClaw. To me, the experience hasn't been it was actually pretty good with OpenClaw. I have more of security concerns, right? And I've seen crazy threads as well as you all on Twitter on, you know, suddenly OpenClaw getting crazy on WhatsApp and doing things it shouldn't. But I think the whole autonomy and memory management, I think is actually quite cool, which it's not related to the model, but more to the taste on how the software architecture is built. But I myself also, I have to admit that I actually quit it. I removed my OpenClaw agent, and I have a server with a self-made, let's say, bot that has access to my Claude account, my Claude Max account for the model. And then I simply built an integration with Telegram. And basically what I'm trying to do right now that is pretty cool is that everything I update on my Claude Code local, any skill, any new thing, it's automatically sent to the server.
All right.
So it feels like the same experience. Like whenever I talk on the phone to the Telegram bot, it really feels the same as a new conversation, let's say on the terminal or on Claude Code local. I'm still feeling a bit this. I miss a little bit though the memory part. I think the memory part of OpenClaw is quite nicely built, and I don't have that well set up.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've been checking out, but this week, like on Anthropic released like most of the OpenClaw features, like the dispatch. They also released the Cloud Code channels. Now you can chat with Telegram or Discord. Like they're doing crazy things.
Totally.
Yeah, and even Perplexity came into the picture with Computer that also made great waves. So I think it's a matter of weeks until maybe they all converge to state of the art. But it's great to see this level of iteration.
One last question to you, Cristian, before we move on to more checking the news and what's happening out there and talking about the future of work. Is coming back to how you have your setup. So we have understood that you have this software knowledge and you're able to, let's say, produce code and take, let's say, good architectural decisions that enable you to ship actual software that is good and actually works without you being an engineer. But I'm more interested, we discussed this in the Spanish podcast with Jesus on what's the concrete setup that you need. But for those in the audience that are listening to us and say, okay, where are these guys coming from? Like I only use ChatGPT or Copilot as an assistant and that's it. What is the basic setup for that individual to get started with Claude Code and to start to have this agent that will basically help you manage your email, your slides, create code for you, and actually do work for you? What would be the kind of the basic setup that someone needs?
So I'm migrating everything to Claude Code. The only thing that I'm not doing in Claude Code right now is like image generation and so on. For all those kind of tasks, I rely on Gemini with Nano. I think those are the best model. But all the other tasks that I used to do in other platforms and so on are now migrated to Claude Code. As we mentioned now, I'm not using the OpenClaw anymore, and I'm with Claude Code. In my case, for me, in my setup, it's very important that I do everything with my voice. It's really weird that I'm typing something. It must be a weird scenario, but I love to speak to the computer. For me, like results are always much better.
Because you're able to think better and you speak faster than you type, right? And you're using Whisperflow or Super Whisper. Which one are you using?
Yeah. Also because I'm a bit lazy, I admit it. But also, I love to be able to you throw everything to the AI. So I don't structure my problem and so on. I just tell it while I'm talking, and another idea comes up, and I also tell it to the AI. I made mistakes. Nothing happens. They also find it and so on. And the outputs are always much better. Whenever I see someone who is typing to the AI, I always do the same recommendation because you tend to include a lot more context when you are speaking. So that's like a core part of my setup. And then I build skills for the things that I do repeatedly in Claude Code. Okay, so I have, in my case, and that's something that I would recommend to the product managers. I have one file with my personal setup in Claude Code. I also have skills for things that I do on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, and so on. And also very important, I have all the code from the technical team in my setup, and I do this because, for example, it's not because I build features, but for example, imagine that I'm thinking about a new feature and I want to know whether something is feasible. It's much easier to ask to the Claude agent, okay, this is my project. This is the documentation of the API that is using. I want to build this feature. Is this feasible? And results are much better. And as a result of this,
you store everything into a markdown file in your Claude, and you keep adding as the text ships.
Yeah, exactly. I also have files with explanations of how all the code works. So the agent doesn't have to review all the code every time. But this is fantastic. Yeah.
Just getting one step just before that, so that people would picture this. So Claude Code is kind of a local app, right? that works on your local computer. So you have a folder, a typical folder, and that you put the name you want, and then you basically give it access to that folder, right? I think it's important that you don't give access to your entire computer because as you know, context management right now is the key. If you give too much info to the AI, it works worse. So just give it a folder. In that folder, there's a first archive called Claude.md. That is kind of who you are and the basic setup, how the folders are structured and so on. And then you have typically different folders by project, in your case with the skills, or in my case, I have the different departments of the company and most of the things I'm kind of responsible for. And then, as you said, you have a skills folder, and the skills are nothing else than text files that are prompts basically and explain very well what you do. And I have, for instance, a skill that is, for instance, building business cases, right? So we do business cases towards B2B clients in a certain way. And basically, I can raise that skill. You can tell Claude to utilize the skill, or you can just ask something related to the skill, and Claude is smart enough to take it. And it then basically, I dictate or I give it a prompt by text, and then basically I get a new business case prepared for a client, in my case as a Google slide form in the right drive folder. So that's basically the setup for
and I think it's
local
because
files.
There is some hesitancy when you say, okay, what is a skills? And you can pretty much download the skill that is a skill creator by Claude. They made it on Anthropic. It's an official one. And you just tell what you want, and he optimizes for skills instructions. So it's really a matter of starting and figuring it out. So I really like that.
Also, there are marketplaces of skills where you can see like super popular skills for example, front-end design. I have a very cool skill, or copywriting. You can also do those kind of things, and they're really good.
Totally. And the right way to build skills for things that are more custom, in my experience, is to just give a lot of context and good examples. So in my case, for instance, I have a skill to help me write content on LinkedIn. So what I did is I gave it my best posts on LinkedIn that I feel the ones represent me better. And then I asked Claude to build a skill to write like me based on those examples. And I think that works super well as well.
I think I think there is a sort of confusion around the Claude interface and the Claude, let's say, the terminal of your laptop. There are many of these things that you can work even without going into the terminal. There is a memory section in the settings. For my LinkedIn, for example, works as good. It's almost like creating a skills, but simply it sits on something So there are level of depth, but even from the first layer where you start.
Yeah, opening the terminal is not a requirement. You can just work from the Claude app, and it works super well.
I actually believe that in 3 months, like non-technical people will all migrate to co-work in terms of instead of code. It doesn't make sense that we are working with Claude Code, and co-work will evolve a lot because as the Anthropic CEO, they are always talking about the white collar industry, and they're gonna be like an amazing product there.
There's a bit of the same, right? To me, I'm struggling more and more to see the difference and where does one start and then the other, because in the end you can do pretty much almost the same on both. I guess the advantage of using code is that whenever you actually need to code something, you have the whole setup there ready. But I think it's convergent to something that is not too far away. No?
Mm.
Maybe too many features named that will disappear, a bit like Cadnova.
I think it's maybe less scary for non-technical people.
Yeah, I agree.
Exactly. I think the interface of the terminal was exactly a bit more complex, and now things are getting easier. Okay, let's jump onto another section of the conversation. I would like to briefly discuss your view, Cristian, on the future of work before we jump on news of the week. What's your view on the future of product management with the context we just gave of a lot of things changing in AI?
That's a good question. So in my case, one day I think we're gonna die. They're not gonna be more like product managers at all. The next day we think that it's gonna explode. So it's really difficult to predict, to be honest. I think, in my opinion, as of Cristian today, I I think judgment is becoming becoming the center of everything. Like, if you don't want to become a feature factory, you need a lot of people putting product sense on what's going to be built. So I tend to believe that product managers are going to be growing a lot. I tend to believe that the product role is going to be changing, and it's going to change the way that we're speaking right now. We're going to build things. Also, something that I'm worried about is that the moment we're also building, we're losing perspective on other things. Like, for example, I wouldn't like that because of we're building these things, we're not talking to users. So it's going to be a difficult balance in the upcoming months. I think that the role is going to be reshaped. I think also the design role is going to be reshaped. We used to talk about the product maker role. We used to talk about this when the no-code came up. Now with the AI,
no-code is dead. No, I guess what's happening with Bubble and these companies, I think they're over. No,
but now it makes more sense than ever. The fact that one person can manage the whole definition and development and so on. I think the world in 1 year, the development world, is going to look so different to what we have right now. It's really difficult to predict because everything is going to change, to be honest.
I think among the things you said makes me reflect on the judgment part. I think one big risk for us as society, I've seen this graph of young new grads. The need for them is going down, and the new jobs created at the level of seniority is going down because of AI. So if we don't hire youngsters as much, the judgment that they will need to execute down the line, it's kind of at risk. So I see that there is a big, this is not only in product, it's in many function, but I think it's a great reflection for us to really understand how we shape the judgment of tomorrow if we're not investing in young entry levels role today. So yeah, I think that opens up the question on the future of work a bit.
Totally. I was posting this week on a prediction that I did 3 years ago. That was that product man. I did a post on LinkedIn that was went a bit viral. Saying that product managers were going to become the most sought after role in tech. It was the time where still software engineers were the most. It was not even AI engineers at the time. And the reality is that what I'm seeing with very senior software engineers, I had this discussion with Williams this week, is that our kind of tech leads right now are getting closer to product, right? Because if, let's say, the role of coding is done by agents, and let's say junior or mid-level software engineers need to raise their level to almost kind of tech leads, engineering managers, kind of managing a suite of agents, even more senior people get closer to product, right? Which makes me think that maybe, what's going to happen is that the role of senior product people and senior software people, it's somehow converging to something that is very similar. And as you say, there will be some of those maybe with a more technical side of things, taking a bit closer care of architecture and very complex features and so on. But then I think a lot of them will be getting closer to the market and to what you guys said, and I very much agree with, which is what needs to be built, and having good taste and good judgment on how to build it. No, because that's really the end game. Whenever building software is cheap, the question is what software you build and how do you actually build it.
Maybe to close the topic, I think I see a humanization or acceleration of the true human skills at play, where empathy, listening, investigation, judgment is becoming even more important. So maybe 10, 20 years down the line, we'll see those true human skills becoming more important than ever before, which might be a good specialization for us humans.
And then moving closer to the news, what's your view more personally, Cristian, on are you bullish or bearish on will AI take our jobs, or will there be a massive job creation? Are you more on the Citrini side, on which side are you and why?
I'm on the pessimistic side on this. I have to have to say sorry about this. Well, pessimistic depend of the final outcome of how we manage the situation and so on in terms of a society and so on. But I think this change is different to the previous one that we've seen. Like you like people tend to think about like what about the first industrial revolution and so on, but we never replaced the human capacity of being human, of like making decisions, of thinking and reasoning, and then also the human capacity that a robot can do with a human judgment and so on. So I personally, I'm not that optimistic about this because I think that a lot of jobs will be taken by the AI, both like physical and like white collar office roles. And I don't think that, or for example, or I'm not able to see how we're able to replace it with the human capabilities. I'm not able to see how someone who is going to get replaced now, what do they have to learn in order to be employable again? I have that doubt and I'm not able to solve it. I don't know your take on this.
I think my take on it is that we are still not imagining what are the next needs, right? So
I agree.
It's not only the industrial revolution. I think there's more closer changes that are actually proven that it might be a lot of new needs being created. I'm giving this example lately, but there's a lot of running clubs and ceramic clubs and doing kind of things that are very or niche cafeterias there and so on. So I think there's a lot of demand that is being created around very human things, as Andrea said, like very things that you experience and that were not there. And maybe of course, we automate coding, we automate spreadsheets, we automate a lot of analysis work and back office white collar jobs. There might be a surge of actually front office white collar. For instance, not only on the experience side, but for instance, if it's very easy to build products, probably we are going to need not only maybe 10 people to sell a software, but you need actually 20 people, right? So maybe there's a shift in before you had 10 engineers and 10 sales. Now you maybe need 18 engineers or 18 sales to sell well what 2 engineers built, because there's going to be so much competition out there, right? I don't know. I think as code is getting cheap, it's unlocking a lot of new ROIs for software. And I don't think there's a limit to the demand for software. I think you can build so much more software that is cool. So it might be the case that we get 10x more productive in building it, but we need 20x more software. So
I don't know. I'm more with Cristian in the sense that I'm optimistic about the human trajectory, meaning that we can choose if we want to work. I think there will be a time where we wake up in the morning and decide what's the best use of our time. I think maybe influenced by the Greek times where you have a layer of society that was thinking about philosophy, arts, and music. So overall, human condition, I think, will keep improving. Work and job will be reduced as a result, but it won't disrupt society if we find a new way around, maybe a basic income or sorts of this type of instruments. But let's see, it's too soon to say.
Let's see. For now, what the data says actually, and we can get to the news, is that this week on Lenis newsletter, we are on a 3-year high on tech jobs. So basically, the newsletter was pretty cool. And it's been since 2022 that we don't have as many PM product manager openings, which is about 7K current jobs at tech companies. What TrueUp would consider tech companies, which is not financial companies, like pure software players that have PM roles open. Of course, a bigger demand for AI engineers, that's exploding. Also, bigger demand for software engineers. And what I found very interesting is that recruiter demand was at a 3-year high. So there were kind of more than 2,000 recruiter openings at tech firms, which indicates, I guess a bit of that, that if you're hiring recruiters, is that you're going to need to hire a lot of people, right? Which is actually good news for Nova, by the way.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, exactly.
And it indicates like a long-term growth, or at least like medium-term growth of those metrics. I agree, but I don't think that growth for the next 2, 3, 4 years guarantees growth in the next 5, 10, 15. For me, it's hard to see how we're not gonna be like that dependent from Anthropic, Google, and OpenAI, and so on. And I don't know how we're going to manage our economy if they get such a huge part of the value added of all what we have. Because I don't know if those kind of companies are making that much revenue from, like, for example, the Spanish economy. They're not going to be paying almost taxes on Spain and so on. And they're going to replace that many people. I think that's a big challenge there, and I don't know if you agree with this.
But the thing there is that I think on the one side, probably society and governments won't probably let that happen but to get started. But it's also, I mean, these companies are making tons of revenues. There was a piece of news this week that Anthropic had grown by 14x revenue in the last 14 months. So it's basically gone from 1 billion, I believe, to 14 billion ARR or something like this, or 20 billion, something. It was crazy. But the reality is that they are losing a lot of money, right? So if there, as long as there's competition there, I'm not sure they're going to actually be extracting that much.
I think we will, like all predictions. And for example, today Google released a new algorithm that was making their models like 10x cheaper. It was called Turbo something, and all the predictions from like the experts in terms of the energy that they consume and the computation and so on say that they are reducing a lot the cost, and that it's going to keep reducing. So
exactly. So at the very end of things, intelligence will be equal energy costs, right? And if energy goes in the right direction, that's, let's say, almost cheap, almost free. So I think we're going towards a world where intelligence is a commodity, right? And if let's say intelligence is a commodity, then maybe what's not a commodity is actually a very nice event and a very human experience. So that's where you actually pay a lot of money, right? And so
but for building that commodity, you need to invest a lot if you want to have like those kind of quality models and not depend of like US companies.
I think that's a fair challenge. Like, we're very dependent on US companies for sure, but the reality is at the same time the Chinese are creating their open source models. So
and they're depending on us for consumption anyway. So there is no game where you can have people poor, because you need the consumers on the other side of things. So as Ramón said, maybe government or some other indicators will split it. But yeah, I think it's exciting. Or you can always rent yourself to an agent if you want to earn some money. As you know, rentahuman.ai game, there are about 700,000 people working for agents at this time, which is crazy when I learned about it. So we'll see.
Are you thinking about renting yourself?
Exactly. Tell us a bit more about this, because this was actually pretty cool.
It's actually pretty cool because if you follow the evolution of OpenClaw, then turn into Maltbook, which has been acquired recently by Meta, which is a social.
Oh, you got mute.
No, the beauty of life. But yeah, I was saying that when OpenClaw turned into the creation of Maltbook, which is a social network for agent, I went on the web page, and for the first time in my life, I was asked to be verified as an agent, which was the first time. We are used to be verified as human, but you could only access it if you were an agent. And agents in the social network, among other things, a religion, some other ideas they came up with, they realized the bottleneck to act in the human world was that they were codes and agents in a machine. So now you have humans who sign up, and you can go on the website and check out, because you have to take pictures of when your task is completed, and you see people standing with statement in the street, or they do errands, they go do bureaucratic things at the office, which was quite a dystopian example of how things can go. And yeah, I think you should really experiment. I haven't rented myself, but maybe for the sake of trying, you never know.
I mean,
what happened with this Maltbook thing? Because it was acquired by Meta, as you mentioned, no? So what's the play of Meta here? Because I think Meta's vision or mission is connecting people, no? Something like Nokia a bit, no? Wasn't it like that? I didn't understand why Meta was kind of getting into this.
I mean, to be honest, I think it's, I understand from a standpoint of edging against future trends, where if there is a social network that is taking shape, because there are millions of agents, dialogues, and representing their humans, you might want to be there to cross-reference data and so on. The long term, I see it more as an edge than as a short-term return. But yeah, I have no clue. We should ask Mark in the next episode of Signal.
It's not the first clear things that Meta do in terms of roadmap, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Meta is a bit lost, no, in these last few months. Like they were with their Llama models at some point, like making them open source and so on, but they seem to be out of the race, no? Like now the race is Anthropic beating OpenAI. I think there were those ads that you probably saw on, a couple of weeks ago or three that were very, very funny actually. And now apparently they are catching up on revenue with a much higher revenue per user, although they have way fewer users. Then there's XAI that is getting very cool apparently on video, and it's Elon there, so Elon is always capable of doing stuff. And there's of course Gemini and Google, but where is Meta here? Like they've done lots of investment on the metaverse, and I think they have completely removed that.
Yeah.
What's Meta doing?
Yeah, they said this week that they were pivoting, that they are forgetting about the VR world and so on. Like it's all done, and they're going again all AI, as you said.
They purchased this company called the tagging company, no? That they purchased most of it, and that guy, the founder of that company, I can't remember the name, but became now the head of AI for Meta, no? But I haven't seen any new model or any significant advancement on their side.
No, not really.
Anyway, more news of the week. We had the latest batch of Y Combinator. And apparently it was super cool. I don't know if you read that piece of news, but it was cool to read that basically there's this kind of common belief among investors that the winter 2026 batch of Y Combinator has probably be one of the strongest in history. It's mainly B2B AI companies, very few B2C ones. There's a company that went into demo day with 27 million ARR.
No.
Wow, it's crazy. I mean, not all of the companies are actually created in just right before the 3 months. Like some of them arrive with a certain traction. But 27 million ARR at demo day, I think that hadn't happened.
Must be a in the team.
Totally. And it's interesting because there was a post by Gary Tan, a famous VC, that top 10%, if you are to invest in more than 3 YC companies as a fund, if you invest in the top 10%, you get that 15x TVPI kind of cash on cash kind of return on your fund. And if you invest it in the bottom quartile, like the bottom 25%, you already get a 3.3x, which is actually the target for most VCs. And there's actually many VCs that actually don't reach the 3.3x multiple.
I wonder whether
which is
it's
very impressive, right? Like YC has done a tremendous job of actually attracting the best startups in the world.
I think it's both. A bit like top employers, it's a signaling value that then skews things in your favor too. You know, it's a catch-22.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess.
Exactly. There must be an element of that too. Of course,
but the reality is that all other accelerators have failed. Like, you either go to YC or you don't go anywhere. Like, there's no value into going to Techstars. Here in Spain, this what was the name? Demium changed and pivoted to a VC. Like, I think that's very, very interesting. And the fact that this quarter was so good, you know, let's see what really happens in the end. But apparently, there was a lot of hype around that demo day.
Also linked to the news that you mentioned before about the growth of AI roles and so on. Looks like the San Francisco Bay is back on the power. Like, if you remember these last years, there was also always debate on Texas growing a lot, on Florida attracting a lot of companies and startups and so on. But now Silicon Valley is like better than ever.
It's back, yeah. Another piece of news that I enjoyed this week by A16Z, it was an analysis on youth unemployment. We were discussing at the beginning that the youngsters are getting it a bit harder to get a job. And we all believe that is due to AI, right? AI is replacing kind of entry-level jobs, which is in part true. But apparently the same impact is happening with people that haven't graduated from college. And basically at the same time, what their analysis suggested is that people are retiring later in the US. So there was in 2025, apparently the average age of the workforce population aged by an entire year. Typically, the average age of your working population should stay more or less stable, maybe growing a little bit as population gets a bit older. But growing an entire year in a year, it's basically like people are not retiring, like almost, right? Or people are actually even coming back and as they retire and then working back now. So I think that there was an interesting analysis that maybe everybody is discounting the impact on young people and first graduate jobs. But there might be other things playing with population aging and so on.
I think regarding like AI and so on, I've been having some debates about because it feels always that youngsters are the ones that are worst placed with AI. But for many people, it's not. For many people, they see it as a huge opportunity, like people who has no bad habits and doesn't have the old way of working. And I started like looking at that way. And for example, we are now hiring someone for our data and AI team. And we actually like the idea of, someone like very young who is going to be very ambitious about taking like all these new ways of working. So yeah, I agree.
And the reality is that in this Y Combinator batch I just mentioned, apparently it was younger founders than in previous batches on average. So and we have seen incredible companies built by very young people, like Mercor founders. I don't know how old they are, but I think it's in their 25, maybe not even, or 20 something. And they are already in the hundreds of millions of ARR. No, so I agree with you, Cristian. It's true that if have a lot of context on an industry, you know what to build. But the reality is that it's much easier if you don't know how to work, that you learn to work in the new way, because a lot of people will have trouble simply changing how they used to work to the new ways of working.
Totally. Actually, I say it as a joke, the fact that there are like Novas in the Y Combinator.
But it's not a joke. There's a few. There are. Actually, my friend from BCG, Pablo, I think it was the previous batch actually with Karumi, but they're doing amazing. There's always Novas in YC.
Yeah, there are also some guys doing a fintech that were also in Y Combinator from Nova. So we are there actually, yeah.
Yeah, the winner of the Nova 111 student list, right? I think she was there with a new bank, AI native bank.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. I think we're an hour already, so I think think we can leave it here. There's a lot of relevant news, but we'll have to cover them in the next session. So, Cristian, it was a real pleasure to kick off the live version of Signal with you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I enjoyed that.
Thank you for those listening, and see you next week.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Bye, guys.
Signal, where we filter the noise. So see you in the next one. Bye.